Done. We're not. Welcome to CSI Needham. We're going to perform an autopsy on the Patriots, and this is going to take all off season. So you better plug up your nose, put a clothespin on it, get the ammonia ready, and we're going to dive in deep. We got a heck of a show coming up. We got Michael Hurley, we have Meghan Ottolini, we got more. Here's the game plan, ladies and gentlemen. It's brought to you by Shaw's. They're perfecting the art of fresh. You knew that. Facing hard truths. Who needs a number one? Cat scratch fever. A poll in your comments. All that's coming at you. But first coming at you is my Slant. Bill?
Last night's game was the least competitive game that we played last year. So, again, is that what we are, or is that a bad night? Yeah. We'll see when we start playing again next year, I guess.
Well, it could be both, Bill. Okay? It could be both. No team is so bad that it will allow the greatest offensive performance in NFL history to be dropped on them every time out. But what we saw Saturday night is what the 2021 Patriots built to. They started the season 2-4. They ended it 1-4. They started the regular season losing to Miami. Miami then lost its next 7. They ended the regular season losing to Miami, which fired its head coach the next day. To look for a silver lining and say, but it was so great against the Panthers, the Falcons, the Jets, the Browns, the Titans, that's just whistling past the graveyard. Those teams were sitting ducks. Look, roster progress was made in 2021. No doubt. There's a quarterback, a tight end, there's a couple of good wideouts. You got an edge rusher, you got a damn good interior lineman on the defensive line. They weren't here last year, but on-field progress. Honestly, in the most critical games they played in 2021, they actually did worse than they did in 2020. For the third straight season, the Patriots face-planted late. 6-11 after December 1st, the past 3 years. In 2018, too, actually, they were headed south, and then they got to the final 2 games of the regular season, and they righted the ship. But that team had Brady and Gronk and Edelman, not to mention younger versions of a whole lot of defensive players that they still have. I don't know where this is going, but what were your feelings about the faceplant? Because right now, I don't know if I learned enough, Meg, about the 2021 Patriots to say, onward. I still think that there is some fumigating to go on.
I'll tell you what I learned Saturday night in that slop fest. It was a slap in the face to anyone who thought that this rebuilding process was close to completion. Because guess what? After watching the way that they went up against the Bills, not just Saturday night, but the day after Christmas on December 26th, they are not one slot receiver away, okay? The same way that the defense didn't face plan because Jalen Mills was on the COVID list. This is a serious personnel issue. Do you agree with me there?
I do, and I think that there's an upside. And next time you try to slap me, let's alert the producers so we can go to a 2-shot, okay? But I think the way they lost those games should in some way put a spotlight on everything the Patriots have to try and accomplish in the offseason. You know, you can't really take half measures and say we have it under control. The way the Patriots lost in terms of scheme, in terms of slowness on defense, in terms of rudderlessness on offense, in some cases. I mean, we saw a play early in the game. Mac Jones actually played kind of out of his mind early on, and he had Jonnu Smith and Jacoby Myers in the same spot on a route in week 21 or whatever it is relative to the beginning of the offseason, going back to preseason. So those are things that can't happen, and they happen with great regularity into December, into January, when the Patriots were supposed to be cresting.
Well, here's the other thing that we learned, is that having the best coach in the NFL, if not the history of the league, it's not enough. To get you past these teams that have superior talent. You can no longer say, well, Bill will game plan all of it. We've got the edge here. GM Bill, once again, just like last year and with less money this time, has to go out there and find some solutions.
And that's why I think it's great to have a couple ass beatings. Look, you can lose 23-21 and say, hey, we were right there. This way, at least, you know, we weren't right there. And I hope that, you know, Bill understands that as great a head coach as he is, he needs the to use a phrase that they used to use a long time ago, the Jimmies and Joes to fill out the X's and the O's. Because right now, I don't know if they have them. There are constraints, though, cap-wise. Again, it's a long off-season autopsy we got coming at you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Seuss. Let's go now to From the Stands.
I prefer Quincy.
And Tom, your poll results are presented by your New England Ford dealers, built for America, built Ford proud.
Yeah, it was a real easy one today. The number one reason the Patriots nosedived down the stretch is, they weren't that good, overwhelmingly. They lost their edge, got 20%. I'm still flummoxed, 16%. And I'm kind of happy that there's only 8% on the coaching let them down, because I actually think that pie might be the most accurate pie of this entire season for poll results.
I think this is our first blame pie. Am I wrong?
No, we do a poll every week with the pie.
Yeah, but this is the real blame.
No, it's not. We do it every week.
Let's go to the comments.
Get off the salt. You'd remember stuff.
KMS Robot says, their defense wasn't as good as we thought. The linebackers looked old and slow down the stretch. Outside of Jackson and Mills, our cornerbacks can't cover. Mills wasn't even out there, okay?
Well, that's why it was a problem.
Zach says, the roster and coaching staff were a big issue. The GM also failed so much over the last 5 years to make up for it in free agency. Speed and athleticism at linebacker, wide receiver, and cornerback are must-haves. Coaching not to lose instead of coaching to win doesn't work. This pissed me off all year.
Okay.
All right, we got some venting.
I mean, but he was not wrong on some of it.
Josh says they dominated the number 1 seed Titans not too long ago. They were that good, but something happened during the bye week that isn't being reported.
Josh, where was Derrick Henry when they played the Titans? Where was A.J. Brown when they played the Titans? Where was Julio Jones all year, but including when they played the Titans? There were guys on the defense, too, that are escaping me at the moment. They didn't play the Titans. They played a bunch of guys in Titans uniforms who weren't the Titans. Okay?
I think the big question here that people are going to be asking for the
Are you going to defend Josh?
And months to come. No, I'm not going to defend Josh. Sorry, Josh, you're out on your own. You're on Josh Island. But it's going to come down to, did something happen during that bye week, like what was floated just there? Or were the Patriots, was their success really the result of a lucky schedule in the middle there that gave us that bell curve of success?
Because of the Patriots' secrecy, clandestine efforts, and the general practice of nobody says nothing about nothing, there is a general perception that there are way more things that go on than go on. That something had to have happened, whether it be with Malcolm Butler, whether it be during this bye week. To me, you had a team that truly believed it was better than it was, didn't bring the edge necessary against the Indianapolis Colts, and got themselves behind 20-0. There's nothing really sinister about sucking when the teams that you were playing were so much worse than the teams you're about to play. I don't think anything happened except this team burned out.
But that's not fun, Tom.
Well,
that's not fun, and it's not easy to fix.
All right, after the break, we're going to bring in Michael Hurley. And you know what? We don't have Van Noy, so Hurley's going to get subjected to my Slant 2.0. Yeah, we're doing it a little different. Stick around.
Ooh, son of Slant.
Don't move. Growth Potential, brought to you by Dr. Lepresti, 1-800-GET-HAIR. Hey, Dante Scarnecchia, Hall of Fame coach, hopefully one day, had this to say to Karen Garigian from the Boston Herald. Talking about wideouts. We've always had that guy, the guy who moved the chains, whether it was Welker, Edelman, Amendola. When all else failed, he was there. They don't have that guy right now. They got to get a better supporting cast around Mac. They don't want to hear that. That's the truth. Other than Jacoby Myers, who do they got? My Slant 2, son of Slant, now is up. And to me, the notion of a number 1 receiver, which everyone keeps bringing up, conjures up your A.J. Greens and your Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, etc. They're very good players, very expensive players. But those are downfield, outside the numbers wideouts with prices starting at around $11 million per year. They're a losing proposition. First off, the Patriots don't have the cap space for that. Secondly, they are never cracked up what they're meant to do. Moss needed Welker, Gronk needed Edelman, they all needed Falk and or James White. You start with the slot position, which is what Dante's talking about. Deebo Samuel would have been great. Hunter Renfrow was an obvious answer. I drove the bus for Tyler Lockett, Sterling Shepard, and Mecole Hardman. But the Patriots took none of the above. Instead, they took N'Keal Harry. And at the end of that 2019 camp, after they took him, they cut Braxton Berrios. And he's now useful with the Jets. Brandon Lloyd, Brandon Cooks, they were imported ones. Nobody was really happy with them. Just like they really aren't happy with Nelson Aguilar. The slot is the lube in the Patriots engine, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look at the pass-catching personnel who made defenses nervous for New England. Troy Brown, Deion Branch, Randy Moss, Wes Welker, James White, Kevin Falk, Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez, Julian Edelman, and of all that, Moss is the only downfield guy in the bunch. Come here, Hurley. So stop with the wide receiver one stuff, will you please? Right there is fine.
Ooh.
Right there is fine.
Just want to get closer, Tom.
We got a pandemic going on, mister.
Fair point.
Okay. Your feelings on WR1 and the notion that there is a field stretcher who has to take the top off of defense?
I think it's a great point, and you think of some of the best receivers of this generation, Calvin Johnson, Randy Moss, going back, they don't necessarily win Super Bowls. That's not necessarily the key. That being said, and this isn't to disagree, it's more to supplement,
Please disagree.
I come bearing homework. And a rhetorical question. How many teams are there in the NFL?
32.
32. You want to have a guy in the top 32 in receiving yards, and the Patriots didn't this year. They had Jacoby Myers at 33. They had Kendrick Bourne at 44. You're going to want to be a little bit better than that, somewhere, I don't know, in the teens maybe, in the 20s at worst. So I think that's where the happy medium can be found.
What I think, and people will say, hey, balance, it's what you want to a degree. You also want to have that receiver who attracts 1.5 players every time he goes out, sometimes two. That's what Julian Edelman did in 2019. People thought he was toast, and he was a little bit. He was just running around on sawdust in his knee. Between he and James White, they saw 170 targets that year. You don't want it. It's going to have Julian limping by the time he's 42 and probably getting a knee replacement before too long as well. But that's what he had to be. And he also had 1,000 yards receiving and almost 100 catches. So when you have a focal point to your offense, instead of sprinkler all the time, one focal point, then people have to come to that, and it then just turns into geometry.
Well, that was a year where it was just sort of pull the alarm in case of emergency. That was what Julian Edelman's role was, because the receiving core was basically Tom Curran and Mike Hurley out there for the entirety of Tom Brady's last year here.
Before I get to my tweet that I put out, do you see Philip Dorsett and Nelson Aguilar in the same room together ever, or are they the same guy?
Different guy, different roles, different players.
Same guy.
Upgrade. Nelson Aguilar's an upgrade.
He's not an upgrade. He's a higher paid Phil Dorsett. All right, I tweeted this out last night. I said I don't do the same stuff I said previously. Bam, 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 bam. So here were some of the responses. I think Kevin Tully, for instance, he jumped in. He had a good point. Green, T.O., Moss, Megatron, Fitzgerald, Ocho, OBJ, Julio Jones. Greatest field stretches of the past two generations. Not a ring between them.
Julio should have one if we're being realistic.
Speak for yourself. I'm being realistic.
Great
Calvin
catch.
Ridley would make a ton of sense if his NFI, that means non-football injury designation, does roll over for his fourth year and he's still playing for cheap and not $11 million next year. Would work perfectly with Aguilar's money coming off after 2022. It's a good point. There's a lot of detail in there, but it is a good point on Calvin Ridley if he does not have a cold season or not cold, whatever. Explain how every single Kansas City wide receiver is fast and gets separation in yak. If they don't grow on trees, explain the Chiefs. I appreciate the invitation. Mike, I'll give you a chance first unless you want me to take it.
I wouldn't even go to KC. I would go to Pittsburgh. Whoever's you said hopefully Dante Scarnecchia is in the Hall of Fame. Whoever's been picking Pittsburgh's wide receivers for the past 20 years, they deserve their own wing in the Hall of Fame. I don't even know who's the expert.
Kevin Colbert. But when we look at it, okay, let's look at the complete polar opposites of the two offenses. And include Kansas City in there too. Yeah, it's technically really brilliant, and there's a lot of X's and O's and crosses and guys doing different things down by the goal line that make people go, wow, Andy Reid's a genius. There's a lot of plays where they just draw it up in the dirt after the first part breaks down, especially in Pittsburgh. So they're not sitting there saying, I have to get a PhD in route running like Deion Branch. They say, give me a fast guy. Give me a fast guy like Juju Smith-Schuster. Or who's that guy who was always in trouble with Pittsburgh? Be that as it may.
There you go.
Him.
He was great.
He was good. All right, we had a wild card weekend that was super. By any measure, it was super. And take a look at these blowouts. Bengals-Raiders ended up being the first game and the best game.
The Boger Bowl.
The Boger Bowl. Bills-Patriots, a 30-point squishing that wasn't that close. 16 points in the Bucs-Eagles. I hit that. 49ers-Cowboys hit that. Chiefs-Steelers hit that. Rams-Cardinals did not hit that, and still I end up on this minus side. Michael Hurley is an expert in all things idiotic. So, Michael, dumbest thing you saw this weekend?
So I have a tie for the dumbest thing we saw this weekend. One involves the officiating miscues in Cincinnati, where we had a dumb official blow a whistle when Joe Burrow was not out of bounds. So credit to him for being dumb. And then the NFL making it worse by Walt Anderson coming out and saying, yeah, they said it was after the catch, the whistle blew. We have ears and eyes, and the NFL is just saying, no, you fools, you don't. So that was up there. That should be number one. But Dak Prescott running the QB draw with 14 seconds left, with the precision of a Pop Warner quarterback in an August practice, not knowing his tuchus from his elbow, if you'll excuse my foul language, not knowing when to go down, not knowing where to put the ball, and then blaming the officials. If you have 15 minutes, watch Mike McCarthy's postgame presser. It's just loserville.
We're not going to have enough time to get to the other worst. What was the next worst?
The worst team?
Worst performance by a team.
That's the Arizona Cardinals, and I know you disagree with me on this. The Arizona Cardinals were a legit 1 seed that fell off. Not the Patriots being in the 1 seed after 13 weeks. This team was 8-1. They were 9-2, 10-2. They collapsed down the stretch, and then they go out and just don't even show up for the playoff game.
Bias.
Against the Rams. This was.
You got recency bias, son.
I know you want to say it's the Patriots, which fair enough. They're in the conversation.
The Bills scored every single time they touched the ball. Every drive was 70 or 80 yards. I mean, they were complicit. The Cardinals were offensively, Kyler Murray in particular, but the Patriots just got absolutely rototilled.
Listen, it's a competition. I'm not saying the Patriots aren't in there, but to go in, at least there was the weather excuse in Buffalo. I don't know, something was weird about it.
Worst performance by a player.
Oh, that's Kyler Murray. I'm just sticking with the end zone interception. While Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is trying to pump you up on ESPN2, saying you got your back against the wall, there's nowhere else to go, and you literally prove him wrong by going farther backwards and throwing the pick six. That was just a nightmare. I mean, this was a disaster. I picked the Cardinals in this game, and I feel disgusted with myself.
Our friend Dan Katz, Big Cat from Barstool, tweeted at one point, I don't think he has any eyes.
It's not good, Tom.
Worth discussing. We got some early lines we'd love to hit coming up this weekend. Here's the matchups. Hopefully they're more competitive. You got Bengals +3 at the Titans, 3.5. 5.5 the Niners are getting at the Packers. Rams are getting 2.5 at the Bucks, and the Bills are getting 2 at the Chiefs. So we're saying that the Bills would be favored at the Chiefs on a neutral field. You got any that you are saying, I like that one?
I'm interested in the Bucks because we care about the Bucks here. We care about Tom Brady here. I think those Rams might be tough for them. I think it's not just the score that we saw last night. It's the pass rush and Brady not having guys, his full complement of receivers who can get open quickly, so he can get rid of the ball in 2-3 seconds. He takes a couple hits, maybe fumbles. There's a couple
he doesn't
punts.
Fumble, okay?
He could fumble.
He doesn't fumble.
His binky out there is Gronk, and Gronk's not getting open in a second and a half.
He doesn't fumble. You'll be back next year. All right, coming up after the break. How could you do that?
It happens.
Slander at the end.
It happens.
J.C. Jackson, he is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. Patriots going to be able to, well, it is the end of the year. We'll talk about J.C. Jackson's future here in New England in just a moment. Meg-A Hot Take.
Super Wild Card Weekend came and went with more of a whimper than a bang. And I'm not just talking about the Patriots. Aside from the 49ers' hilarious upset of the Cowboys, the second year of the expanded playoffs is a good reminder that more doesn't always equal better. Both 7 seeds, the Steelers and the Eagles, got their doors absolutely blown off by teams we all knew were far more talented than them going in. Extra playoff football looks great on paper, but if the games aren't that competitive, it's not much of a product. That said, money talks, so don't expect this format to go anywhere. Just hope for less talent disparity next year.
Fair. It's fair. A fair point.
I was excited for a Monday night football game in the playoffs, and I turned it off to rewatch When Harry Met Sally last.
Do you know how soon it will come that we're actually watching Tuesday and Wednesday night football too? I have a real feeling that's going to happen.
Well, we got some of it through the COVID times, but time now for Quickfire, brought to you by your local New England Honda dealers. To cap it off, the Patriots are in a situation with the salary cap.
They are. Go to overthecap.com, which is one of the best league issues related to the cap, getting everybody's numbers together. It says about $13 million. Miguel Benzan, who is a Pats cap expert, says they're closer to $2 million. I'll trust Miguel because he's good at putting the incentives that are about to be realized in there. The bottom line, though, is Patriots are not going to be able to shop like they did last year. You understand that they wouldn't be able to do that. But when you look at some of the cap hits the Patriots are carrying, there's $10 million and there's no way to get out of it for about 6 different players. You could release Nelson Aguilar, save $10 million, but you're still going to carry $5 million in dead cap. The Patriots are up against it, and it's going to be hard for them to make a lot of moves with that lack of cap space.
Yeah, and they absolutely hit on some guys in that big free agency spend last offseason, but you look at the top 5 contracts on that under that salary cap, and Nelson Aguilar and Johnny Smith are in the top 5 of their big contracts, and obviously they didn't produce for you on the field the way that you would have liked. But one guy who did produce very well for most of the season, J.C. Jackson, and that brings us to the J.C. conundrum.
Yeah, and he did produce well for most of the season. And I think most of us would agree, and he got a significant number of All-Pro votes at the end of the year. You didn't get mine. I went A.J. Terrell and Jalen Ramsey, but he is certainly deserving of being a Pro Bowl corner. But those come at $16, $17, $18 million. Unless he's going to be okay with being franchised, and I don't even know if the Patriots have room to do that without significant restructurings, then they're going to have a hard time keeping him around. So you don't want to have him go and get nothing in return. But I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a franchise and trade of J.C. Jackson. Look, he really didn't play that great against the Bills in either of the final 2 matchups.
Well, it was Stephon Diggs. I mean, it is tough. I know he's supposed to be your shutdown corner on J.C. Island.
Were you loading up to
Stephon
defend him?
Sorry?
You were loading up to defend him when I said that he didn't play that great.
I had this.
He also got shredded by Stephon Diggs at the end of last year.
Let's move on to hard decisions, because this one's a little
You
bit
can't
of a
be paying a shutdown corner that much if you can't shut down the #1 guy on the other team.
Devin McCourty, Matthew Slater, Dante Hightower. Do you see these guys coming back? Should the Patriots bring them back?
It's going to be a difficult decision because these guys are cultural touchstones as well as valuable players. But some of them are going to feel on their own as if they want to move on, and some of them the Patriots are going to look at and say, you're not as good as you were 3 or 4 years ago. So they got to get younger. They got to get faster. There's some goodbyes that are going to have to come. Goodbye.
Goodbye.